Is it possible that a driver, in just one day of testing in the rain, forces an entire team to rethink their new car from scratch? What happened on the second day of private testing in Barcelona not only left Ferrari speechless, but it could be the start of something much bigger. Subscribe to continue uploading more of this type of content now, if we continue. January 27th, 2026 seemed like one of those gray days in which Formula One barely makes headlines. Overcast skies, persistent rain, low track temperatures, conditions that any team would avoid at all costs to avoid risking their valuable new car. 9 of the 11 teams chose to stay in the garages, protected and carefully calculating their future sessions. But at Ferrari, there were no doubts. They made a decision that seemed risky, but in retrospect could mark the turning point of their season. Instead of running away from the water, they decided to face it. They set out with determination, knowing that the information gained in such unstable conditions could be more valuable than any fastest lap in perfect weather. And it was in that unpredictable setting that Lewis Hamilton got behind the wheel of the new SF26 for the first time in a serious way. A car that, until then, had only traveled 15 symbolic kilometers in Fiorano. He had barely breathed. And yet, in just a few laps in the Catalan rain, it began to say more about itself than any simulator or test bench. Hamilton took to the track after 2 p.m. What was expected was a session of accumulating kilometers, perhaps some clean laps to validate sensors, brakes, and test cold systems. But what started as routine turned into a data storm. The telemetry began to set off alerts, not because of problems, but rather the opposite. The car was performing beyond expectations. And not only that, he was doing it with an unexpected level of stability and performance, piloted by someone who until months ago had been wearing a different uniform. The Briton, in the rain, ran 56 laps without a single loss of control, without excessive blocking, without abnormal degradation. In other words, a perfect batch. Engineers in Maranello, connected in real time, saw patterns emerge that made no sense within their previous models. Each lap generated a new layer of information that contradicted what was expected of the car. And above all, it made it clear that what they had in their hands was much more than an evolution of the SF25. It was something qualitatively different. The key moment came when they began to compare the data from that session with Charles Leclerc's records in the morning. In theory, the conditions were similar. Same track, same base configuration, same aerodynamic package. But there was one difference that no one could ignore. Hamilton, in comparable conditions, was half a second faster per lap. Half a second. In modern F1, that's not an improvement. It's a revolution. It was not an isolated return. It was a sequence, a demonstration of consistency. And that is what impacted the technical team the most. Because it wasn't just about speed. It was the way Hamilton interacted with the car. The way he interpreted the grip, how he modulated the brake in low traction areas, how he took care of the tires without sacrificing time. It was as if he had spent a year developing the car, when in reality, it was his first full day on the track. These types of differences do not appear by accident. Half a second is the kind of advantage that can change the internal hierarchy of a team. It's enough to redesign engine maps, reevaluate weight distribution, and above all, change aerodynamic development priorities. Because if there is a driver capable of unlocking that advantage in difficult conditions, the entire team must listen to him. Most disconcerting to the engineers was the matter-of-factness with which Hamilton described each lap in the subsequent debrief. There was no euphoria, no grandiose speeches. Clinical precision only. He detailed where the car was moving more than it should, which curve required differential adjustment, how the load felt on wet curbs. Every comment matched the graphs. Each sensation had a backing in data. He did not speak as a driver who improvised, but as a technician who knew exactly how to translate his driving into useful information for the team. The magnitude of the impact was not immediate, but it was irreversible. In Maranello, minor meetings were suspended, engineers from other areas were summoned, and a complete review of the simulation model was ordered. Not because there were errors, but because Hamilton had shown something that the model had not yet contemplated. And that for a team that fights for thousands, changes everything. What began as a simple data collection in the rain ended up revealing a much more powerful truth. Ferrari had been building cars for years without knowing exactly what kind of driver could get the most out of them. And the arrival of Lewis Hamilton exposed that reality with almost brutal clarity. From their first session on SF26, engineers began to detect a completely different pattern in the data. The telemetry graphs showed cleaner corners, fewer steering corrections, extended braking points without loss of stability, and above all, a constant progression lap after lap. But what made this performance even more impressive was that it was not a different car. It was the same SF26 that Charles Leclerc had used in the morning. So what was happening? The technicians in the vehicle dynamics area were perplexed. They were seeing things that, until then, only existed in simulation. Areas of the track where they thought the SF26 couldn't sustain an aggressive pace. Hamilton not only did it, he repeated it lap after lap. Curves like Barcelona 7, where the 2025 car suffered a negative balance transition, were now seen in the telemetry with perfectly distributed loads. It was as if the driver was reconfiguring the car from the inside without touching a single nut. But perhaps most telling was his impact on the team's mentality. Ferrari is not used to drivers who master this level of technical dialogue. Charles Leclerc, for all his talent, tends to offer more emotional feedback, more feeling-oriented. Hamilton, on the other hand, entered Maranello speaking the language of engineers, and that completely changed the dynamics of work on the track. For the first time in a long time, the car wasn't just talking through sensors, it was talking through its driver. It's not about saying that Hamilton is better than Leclerc. It's about understanding what is different. And that difference opened a door that Ferrari didn't know existed. A door to a deeper understanding of your own technical project. Because the SF26 in Hamilton's hands stopped being a prototype in development to become, for a moment, a millimeter precision tool. And that forces Ferrari to rethink not only its settings, but its entire development philosophy. During the post-session briefings, real-time data was cross-referenced with records from previous days. The simulation area was forced to recalibrate its base parameters. The validity of the environmental conditions was verified, any possible external interference was looked for, and it was even checked if there was a measurement error in the installed sensors. All to try to understand how it was possible that, in theoretically unfavorable conditions, the car behaved so efficiently, but only with one driver that it didn't take long for the conversations to escalate to the highest offices. Mattia Binotto is gone, but his legacy of technical doubts still lingers. Frederic Vasseur, current team manager, welcomed the reports with a mix of relief and concern. Relief because the SF26 could be much more competitive than expected. Concern because if Hamilton is unlocking this advantage so early, it means that the team's current development tools are probably not optimized for that type of driving. And that's the central problem. It's not just that Hamilton is faster. It's exposing a gap between what Ferrari believes it has built and what it has actually built. Is the difference between designing in the laboratory and understanding on the track. Therefore, the rethinking was not superficial. It was not an adjustment of settings. It was a complete redefinition of priorities. The development structure of the SF26 changed its technical axis. From focusing on generic aerodynamic adjustments or load improvements in fast corners, they went on to explore the exploitation margin of the front axle. The progression of the dynamic rake during braking, the redistribution of weights in mixed sections, and even the philosophy of energy recovery were put on the table. Because if Hamilton is able to find tenths with the current setup, how much more performance could he extract if the car is developed with his style in mind? This new perspective even forced us to reconsider the career development plan. What was previously a progressive evolution is now focused on refining those areas where the British driver is already making a difference. It's not about making the car more comfortable. It is about enhancing the synergy that has just been discovered. Because for the first time in many years, Ferrari has found a driver who not only suits its car, but reveals what the car can be. But this internal revolution also has a price. Charles Leclerc, until now the team's point of reference, faces silent pressure. Because while his times are good, Hamilton's telemetry suggests there is a different way to drive this Ferrari. A more efficient way, more incisive, and that generates tensions that the team must know how to manage if it does not want a technical advantage to become a competitive fracture. Ferrari has a unique opportunity before it to build on a real technical base, validated by the track, not by the simulator. But it also faces a complex challenge, redefining a project in real time without losing internal cohesion, without compromising the trust of its two pilots, and without falling into past mistakes where signals were ignored. The SF26 is no longer a car under evaluation. It is a high-performance platform with explosive potential, if the team knows how to listen to those who understand it best. When the clocks stopped ticking laps and the engines shut down at the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya, What was left was not just a data file. It was a declaration of intent. Lewis Hamilton did not need to set a pole time, nor sign a victory to send a clear message to the paddock and to Ferrari's own engineers. There's a new way of interpreting this car, and he has already mastered it. Subscribe to continue uploading more of that content. Now you really think about all this.